What's going on, guys? It's the fantasy hockey expert here, also known as Eric Wilson, and today we're going to be breaking down a big preview of Team Canada and the 2026 World Juniors, the year where we need to return as champions. If you're Canadian, you know what I'm talking about. It's been a while, and it's also been a while since Coach Dale Hunter has coached the team. We had a big title in 2020, and it feels like it's just time for Team Canada to rebound and just create a bit of a new spark when it comes to the youth surrounding Canada and Canadian players. I think we've seen a lot of the Russians and Europeans, even Americans, break out and get a lot of attention. But with Gavin McKenna being the projected #1 pick next year, I think there's no better time to kind of relapse and reminisce the Connor Bedard era in the World Juniors. So we're going to get to a bit of a Team Canada preview and a bit of projections when it comes to fantasy hockey. So with that being said, let's get started. No better way to start than with the schedule for Team Canada. So Canada is in Pool B for this tournament. You have Pool A and Pool B, where there's no crossover games until the round robin is finished. Round robin's going to conclude on New Year's Eve as usual, where Canada is going to have their toughest matchup, which is going to be against Finland. It always seems to be a tough matchup on New Year's Eve. I don't know why, but I mean, it makes for a nice little countdown to New Year's for 2026 beginning. But to start off the tournament, Canada plays Czechia, a nice 8:30 puck drop if you're Eastern time like myself, living in the Greater Toronto area. So you have an 8:30 puck drop against Czechia. It is a bit of a revenge game, not for last year, but for the year before, where Czechia dominated Canada the last few years. It's weird to say, but it's not like Canada's had their number. We've had some couple nice wins against them, but I don't think the Czechs are worried, and I think that is a little concerning. But I mean, as we get through this schedule, I think Canadians are going to feel a lot better, including myself, about the roster and just how we're going to finish, and maybe see a nice semifinals or finals matchup, depending on how everything goes in the other pool. Next up, we're going to face Latvia on December 22nd. Sorry, not December 22nd, December 27th. So it's going to be Canada-Latvia. Back-to-back game. That should be an absolute kind of score fest for Team Canada. So I don't see any problems there with Latvia, just because they haven't won a ton of games recently, but you never know, knock on wood. Next up is December 29th versus Denmark. That's going to be an earlier puck drop. I believe it's 3 p.m. Eastern time. And again, a team that we shouldn't struggle with, but I mean, Denmark has the Canadians when it comes to the last 365 days. So won't get into that anymore because we don't need to look at the negatives, but it's almost time for the positives, which is going to be the lineup for Canada. And I think this roster is constructed really well. I give full kudos to whoever made the cuts and made the kind of last minute roster additions. But despite not having the call-ups of any NHL players such as Berkeley Catton or Sam Dickinson, we were able to get Michael Misa loaned from the San Jose Sharks. And that's going to be a big part of this roster. Now, finishing off this schedule, you have December 31st versus Finland. That's an 8:30 p.m. puck drop, and it's going to probably decide how Group B ends up. Now, there is a chance that this game's a little bit meaningless when it comes to the kind of pools and who we face off against. So let's say Canada's 3-0, and then Finland's, call it 1-2 or 2-1. There's a rare chance that the game's going to mean something, but in past years, it's usually meant something. So expect a big matchup where you see a lot of good Finnish players. Finland did have some big cuts as well, so I expect a strong team out of Finland. And this game could be where you see a goaltending change, depending on if it means something, right? You might not want to start your guy who's been hot if the game's meaningless and if you're going to play in 2 days. So you really never know. We're going to see a nice Monday nighter semifinals coming after this Boxing Day matchup. So this is pretty exciting, and to go on to our roster, I think this is what you guys are probably waiting for. When it comes to fantasy relevance, I'm going to break it down really quickly into kind of tiers. So we'll start off with our tier 1 here, which is going to be our 3 guys. We almost want to call them draft and forgotten pillars. So we have Michael Misa, we have Gavin McKenna, and we have Porter Martone. Starting with Michael Misa, second overall pick. He dominated the OHL when he played there. Dominated minor hockey, and he has some NHL games under his belt. Doesn't have a ton of top line experience or anything. He was really kind of pushed off of the top 6 and given a lot of minutes with kind of some veterans there, guys like Colin Graff, guys like Philip Kurashev, etc. But he's going to be the 1C in the power play one kind of guy that I think the puck gets moved to really quickly. He's dominant with the puck. He can move it, but he can also skate. So expect him to be a big name, one of the top point producers in the tournament. Might even surpass Gavin McKenna. McKenna's going to be the second guy we talk about in this tier 1. He's got 18 points in 16 NCAA games. He kind of calls this a bit of like, he talked about the haters and the doubters, and I think this is going to be big for him just to kind of go out there and play his game. He only had 1 point last year, but expect him to have at least 5 or 10 this year. So no doubts there. And then our last guy, Porter Martone, a guy with a really high ceiling, but I think someone who needs to show just consistent offensive production. So a guy who was already drafted to Philadelphia. I believe it was 6th overall or something last year, maybe even 4th, but big guy, should dominated at the OHL level, and should be beyond for years to come. So that's our tier 1 when it comes to point producers, and even when it comes to category production, you're going to see some of those categories like shots and power play points being produced. Tier 2 is going to be starting off with number 1 defenseman Zayne Parekh. He also was loaned. I didn't mention that, so big kudos to Parekh for joining the tournament and probably gaining some confidence back after a bit of a brutal stunt with the Calgary Flames, which was not his fault, but just a mess there in Calgary when it came to the start of the season. Next up, you have TJ Ginla, a guy who's kind of connected to the Calgary Flames, but is actually a Utah prospect, and a guy who's a stud winger. You need guys like this who are just absolute studs when it comes to point producers, guys who might not be the grittiest, but you need guys who are going to shoot the puck, create some offense, have a good cycle game. And our third guy in this second tier is Michael Hage. In case you haven't heard of Michael Hage, he's a Habs prospect known as a draft steal for many who know. He was actually taken, I think, 25th overall. So he's just been promoted to power play 1. Big note if you're in pools, if you want to profit some money there. So that's going to be our last guy from tier 2, and let's move on to tier 3. This is probably my favorite guy in Team Canada, and it's Kashawn Aitchison, a guy who was drafted, I believe, 15th overall last year. I thought he could get drafted higher, but he does have some holes in his game, according to a lot of scouts. A guy who loves to shoot the puck, loves to dangle, but he loves to lay the body. So if you're looking at hits, he's a guy you're going to want to look at in pools and in future fantasy hockey drafts in the NHL. I really think this guy's going to be almost like a mini Dustin Buffalo. He can just go out there and lay guys out, but then on the next side, he's on the 3-on-3 overtime, and he's showing that with the Barrie Colts. So moving on, you had Jett Luchanko, a guy who has NHL experience. This guy's going to be good for years to come, but he's just kind of overlooked. He doesn't have that name value, you call it, where he might not be getting you points, but he's great in the defensive zone. I expect him to be on the penalty kill, despite not being on every single penalty kill unit in practice. Our last guy for tier 3 is finally where we get into our goaltenders, and that's going to be with Carter George. Now, that doesn't mean Jack Ivankovic should not be looked at and not play at all, but Carter George is the guy. He actually had the best stats in the tournament last year, and I think people forget that he is consistent and a little older than Ivankovic as well. So Carter George is the guy to be. You also have Cole Bowden, an honorable mention here, who was on the team last year. So that experience should carry over a little. He's a Utah prospect, and that kind of caps off our tier 3 fantasy value. So I thought this would be a nice video. I'm Canadian. I thought that making a Canada preview would be the best way to put it as the fantasy hockey experts. So we are going to get back to some NHL content going forward, but thought I could make this video, guys, before our NHL slate wraps up tonight. We have the Leafs, Penguins, and many other good hockey games, so go check those out. And make sure to follow me for more on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and more.